Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to our Virtual Talks September edition. I'm really excited about our talk today. We have an exciting speaker joining us. We've been trying to work with him for the last few weeks to make this talk happen. So really excited. We were finally, able to make it work. Before we kickstart with the actual content part of the talk, I'm going to just go over a few introductory things for those of you who might be joining us for the first time today. So I can pull up the comments feed here. So let's see how many folks who are joining in have not heard about DesignX before. Are there folks here who are joining in for the first time who've not attended an event before? I do see quite a few folks joining in, some familiar names coming in. Annie, Christine, Katron. Okay, quite a few folks popping in the comments. Yeah, please feel free to also share your locations, trying to make virtual less awkward, which of course Zach will be talking a lot about today. So for those of you who might not be aware about our community and what DesignX is all about, we started about 3.5 years ago, and the main goal of DesignX was to help elevate design and designers across the globe. And so, how do we do that? We do it in primarily two ways. Right now, with everything that's going on across the world, it's only kind of one main way. But when things were normal, of course, we had the online part of our community. So we run two Slack communities. One is DesignX community, over 5,500 plus members, and the other one is Design Leadership Community, another 1,200 design leaders across the globe. And then, I've purposely removed all the in-person event photographs so you don't feel bad about it. But we also, generally have done a lot of in-person events across Toronto, Vancouver, New York, London, Amsterdam. And these days, we're doing everything virtual, and still trying to ensure the community is able to connect with each other and grow together and learn from folks like Zach. And beyond the the Slack communities interactions as well as event focused interactions, we also work on a lot of community resources. So we have a job board on our website, we have a newsletter, and we recently released a conference directory on conferences.design, which has all the latest updated information around design conferences across the globe, and of course with everything having gone virtual. A lot of this work, cannot happen without the support of some incredible partners and sponsors. So I'm really thankful to our friends, a leading product and design studio based here in Toronto, Canada, called Intersect. And I'm excited. Today we have Izuru, who's the VP of Design at Intersect, joining us in welcoming all of you to this virtual talk. So let's get some virtual emojis, applause, and welcome Izuru.
Hi, everyone. Hey, Preet. Hi, everyone. It's truly an honor to be here. I've attended a lot of DesignX's events and conferences over the years. It's been really cool to see this community grow. As Preet said, I am thankful to lead a design team for a Toronto-based professional services company. For those of you who may not know who we are, like I said, we focus on product design primarily in sort of a fintech, banking, insurance space. Our parent company is actually a big data entity in the US called CoreLogic. And because of that partnership, we end up working in those specific verticals. But, I love this community. My team loves being a part of it, and I love all the resources and conversations that go on here. So very excited to hear Zach talk today.
Thank you, Zuru. A lot of virtual applause falling in for you. But I wish they would make emojis with some audio clippings in the background. That would be help make it more interactive. Izuru, how so? We were talking about this earlier. You're quite excited about Zach's talk today, all about remote work. There's a camp that says this is the new normal, and for some folks, it's quite exciting. How has your experience been as of course someone who's going through it all, but also managing an entire team of designers. Yeah.
I would say it's probably a mixed bag, right? I think first and foremost, I just am extremely thankful that remote work has allowed my team to stay safe, right? I think that trumps everything that we may face as a challenge from a emotional or delivery perspective. I think the fact that people can mentally and physically stay safe by working from home, that's great. Now, on the flip side, I thought this would, like a lot of us probably thought this was a temporary thing. Temporary is obviously relative, but, we were thinking 3-4 months, maybe life gets back to normal. I think it's kind of obvious that this is going to go on for a little bit longer. So, as a design leadership, I think the challenge for me is what are the long-term impacts of working from home, right? Or being completely remote. I had some really talented designers join us in early January, and I feel terrible for them because they didn't get to experience some of the onboarding and the in-person relationships that got built. One designer was with us for 3 weeks, and then we switched completely to remote, and I can only imagine how difficult that is. And I think from a sort of a growth and mentorship perspective, I'd love to hear, how different people are handling this, but how do you get the growth part of design, and how do you sort of get people to have the same sort of velocity in their growth when everything has to be through a booked Zoom meeting? The things that would typically happen in the office through just association, overhearing of how other people tackle problems, we don't have that luxury anymore, right? So I think now it's a much more concentrated effort to make sure those things are happening, and they come with their own challenges. So, to sum it up, it's been a mixed bag.
Right. So totally hear you. Totally hear you on those challenges and intricacies of moving teams all remote. And no pressure, Zach. We hope you have all the answers for us. Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Isuru. Once again, really appreciate you, of course, being an incredible part of our community, and also all the support that you help us with, like myself and the team at DesignX with Intersect. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was Isuru and the wonderful folks at Intersect who've been supporting us since beginning of the year. Now, as we head into the talk part of the afternoon, or actually we have folks joining us from quite a few time zones, so from whatever time it is there on Friday. Before we head into there, just a few things. So if you are, there will be a lot of incredible knowledge and learning shared today. So when you are heading over to Twitter or other social media channels to share those learnings and talk about today's session, please do include us in those conversations. Myself and the team really appreciate that. So our handle is @WeAreDesignX, and you can use the hashtag DesignX Virtual Talks. And let's get ahead. So really excited to be welcoming Zach Yorke. Zach is the staff UX researcher at Google. He's been working on remote communication and collaboration products for the past 6 years. So it's not just something, he's not just sharing learnings from last 2 months alone. And he also recently published 2 incredible write-ups, The Science of Why Remote Meetings Don't Feel the Same and How to Harness the Power of Inclusivity on Remote Teams. Both those write-ups are linked in Zach's bio on the website if you do want to check them out after the session. Prior to working at Google, Zach also worked at IDEO and has taught a business class for design entrepreneurs at the School of Visual Arts MFA program. Zach received a BA from Amherst College and an MFA from University of Pennsylvania. So I'm not going to take up a lot of time, and let's again have a big virtual round of applause to welcome Zach. Hey, Zach.
Hey, Preet. Thank you very much. And thanks to Zuru also. That was a really nice intro. And hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Let me get started. Yeah. All right. We have probably all seen how the pandemic is pushing us to work more remotely. And we're probably wondering, why does communication and video calls feel so different from in-person conversation? Like Preet mentioned, as a researcher at Google, I've spent the last 6 years digging into some of the science behind that question and working on remote products and working on distributed teams across the US and Europe. So today I'm going to share a couple of things I've learned, and I hope they're helpful for you and your remote collaborators. Don't hesitate to drop questions into the comments. We're really looking forward to the dialogue just after the talk. So first, I'm going to show why it makes sense to really lean in to the pandemic as a learning experience. Then we'll dive into the science behind why remote meetings don't feel the same. And then we'll end with some thought starters to help us look ahead, not just get through this thing, but maybe even grow. So let's be honest, the last few months have probably been rough for all of us in different ways. After 6 or 7 months, I still haven't gotten used to these signs in the park near my house that hammer home exactly what social distancing means. They give me the heebie-jeebies. And like most people, I miss the stuff that helps us feel connected. Casual hallway conversations, fist bumps, hugs. The pandemic has put meetings and remote collaboration under a microscope. And work from home is raising awareness of these persistent problems like information overload, distraction, multitasking. We can all make choices that protect our attention, but it's really tough in a day full of calls that can just kind of drain our energy. So multitasking can leave us feeling scattered with our dopamine receptors just kind of shot to hell. But even if we're trying to be fully present, we're working harder than we normally would to read people's reactions and kind of really stay in a conversation. We used to fly around the world to read reactions and build trust. And I think now many of us are searching for new ways to build that trust remotely. And I think on some days we're finding it. In the last few months, the emotional range of a lot of my meetings has actually gotten wider. I've laughed genuinely hard belly laugh, listening to goofy stories from colleagues. And I've actually wept in a parent support group with 80 others at the bravery of a fellow parent caring for a kid with special needs. So point is, although we are disconnected, I think we're also having these moments that we might not have had if things were just business as usual. And I think that's a big deal because the science shows that feeling connected actually makes a difference, both for our well-being and for our productivity. Making personal connections builds empathy. It feels good, but it also impacts the quality of the work. There's actually evidence that teams who share personal information actually perform better than those that don't. And it makes sense that teamwork can improve productivity and performance. But teams can actually only thrive when people feel safe. You may have heard that term. And psychological safety is a rare but fundamental factor for having an effective team. You might feel like carving out time at the start of a meeting to connect is a waste of time, or maybe it feels natural. Either way, know that the science shows that this is kind of an investment that can actually pay off in the form of higher quality work. I think another thing I've seen just around me is that the pandemic has really sparked genuine introspection among my colleagues and my friends. Some people are feeling isolated. Other people can't get a moment to themselves. Others are feeling energized, hiking, biking, picking up creative hobbies. Other people are seriously struggling to stay afloat. But almost everyone is better off when they're finding ways to learn from all this stuff. I've been inspired to see people asking tough questions about how they're showing up to meetings, running little experiments to reshape team dynamics. My hope is that when we finally return to a new normal, or probably like a wildly diverse set of new normals, plural, those questions and those little experiments are going to pay dividends. I believe doing that work to learn from all this can actually help us grow into a better new normal. May even make in-person collaboration better than it was before. So in the spirit of learning, I want to share with you some of the science behind remote communication. These are some of the unique advantages of in-person conversation, being in the same room. This is the stuff that we cannot quite do from our laptops yet. So first one, full fidelity context. When you're talking to somebody across the table, you take for granted that you can read their expressions. Just hear the nuance in their voice. Curiosity, skepticism. Ooh, was that sarcasm, confusion? That's huge. And it's harder to do remotely. Second one, as we speak, we're actually processing a stream of nonverbal cues. And this rapid, instant feedback, we use it to gauge our listeners' understanding. Third one, giving a presentation. In person, you can read the room easily. You might pick up on a sidelong glance or pause to address a client's question about your design. Fourth one, hallway conversation moments. Izuru mentioned this in the intro. It's hard to have those spontaneous, impromptu exchanges, the chat about your weekend plans next to the coffee machine. Everything goes on the calendar nowadays, and it's hard to find that time. So why do these four things matter so much? Although video calling has actually been around for almost 100 years, Bell Labs, fun fact, Bell Labs started experimenting with video telephones in 1927. Although it's 100 years old, it still feels awkward because our species has actually spent 70,000 years learning to communicate in person. When you zoom out and look at this timeline, this context, remote communication is still really in its infancy. Just think for a second about how much of a game changer conversational skills have been for our species. Sending and interpreting social signals helped our ancestors learn to hunt, form families, grow food for the first time, and some of our newest innovations like writing and building machines. So point is, today, the tech that mediates that communication removes these little things that we take for granted when we're communicating face to face. Okay, so let's jump from the macro human timeline back to micro moments of meetings. We have all probably felt the pain of audio delays. Whoa, wait, you're breaking up. Can you hear me now? How about now? Is this better? Like we've all every call, it feels like some days have that back and forth. And so this is one of the most obvious things that we take for granted that's getting removed. And what you might not know, though, is that a bad connection is not just annoying. It can actually mess with the fundamental mechanics of conversation. So, for example, an audio delay can make it feel like someone is interrupting you or hesitant to answer your question. It can actually put us on edge and make us feel like we're coming across as rude or shifty. So one more example, just after I pause to ask if something makes sense, an extra half of a second is enough to make me worry, oh no, I'm rambling. I've lost my listener. And then a second later, I feel relieved when I hear, oh, sorry, Zach, I was muted. So point is, we're all riding these little 5-second emotional roller coasters several times a day. And because every audio packet that gets delayed on its way through the internet makes us do a little extra work. So let's dive a little deeper. What is going on in that micro moment? When the sound from someone's mouth doesn't reach your ear until a half a second later, you actually start to notice that because we are all hardwired to avoid talking at the same time and to minimize the silence between turns. So after 70,000 years of practice, the average gap between turns in adult conversations across languages is about a quarter of a second. So even a half a second delay is more than double what we're used to. That's the limits of technology bumping up against these habits of speech that are hardwired into us. We don't usually think about how we take turns in conversation, but it's actually a form of cooperation. Going back and forth actually builds a shared understanding in everyday conversations like, what should we have for lunch? all the way up to what goals should we set for Q3. And visual cues are part of how we do that back and forth, how we build that shared understanding. So when you're across the table, you might notice someone raises an eyebrow or they lean forward, and without thinking, I'll pause so you can jump in. Because seeing that eyebrow movement is harder over video, we're actually less comfortable jumping in. We take fewer turns. In fact, we take about 25% fewer turns over video when social cues are harder to see. And that means that conversations become less like dynamic dialogues and more like a series of mini monologues. I talk, you talk. One reason we take fewer turns is because we're actually more comfortable when we can read people's reactions to what we're saying. So we want to be able to see the attitudes and the emotions of our listeners' face. Are they still with me? Are they still paying attention? Do they understand? We actually seek out more visual connection when we need more clarity, like when we meet a new team member or when we're listening to a complex idea. Experimental psychology actually has a way to measure our ability to understand the emotional states of others. It's called the reading of the mind of the eyes test. That's a fun one to Google. Reading of the mind of the eyes test. It's a quick test you can take. It measures social sensitivity. And that's a type of emotional intelligence or empathy. So, and this is really cool. The science of turn taking actually shows us why social sensitivity matters so much. It shows that how we share the floor in conversation, or as my mom likes to say, how we pass the talking stick, it actually influences how well we make decisions, brainstorm, solve problems. This is why conversation dynamics are actually a very big deal. They're an empirical measure of group intelligence. And that's an extension of the IQ test from the 1920s. So in 2010, computational social scientists like Sandy Pentland, Anita Woolley, others, they published evidence on what makes one group smarter than another one. They found that higher performing groups are not the ones where individuals have higher IQs. It's groups where people are more sensitive to the emotional states of others and who share the floor in conversation more equally. So conversation dynamics also impact how we build up trust and psychological safety. And all this stuff matters for our working sessions, our design reviews, our daily stand-ups, one-on-ones, client pitches, decision-making meetings, all the communication we're doing through our laptops now. So audio and video friction is annoying, it's exhausting, but these micro moments of meetings, they also add up to something bigger. We can't ignore them. They actually shape our decisions, our relationships, team norms, even culture. So remote teams can be as effective as co-located ones. But they've got to get over these unique challenges of feeling connected. They've got to give deliberate attention to communicating complexity, coordinating towards a common goal, and building trust. Quick example, safety is huge for design teams. Remote teams doing peer reviews of design. I'm often in the loop on designs as a work in progress, and teams that are deliberate about making space for critique and establishing norms to ensure everybody feels comfortable sharing their work, getting feedback, giving feedback, those teams tend to trust each other more, and that trust allows the expertise on the team to travel. Design teams that don't have that trust have a harder time learning from each other, coordinating their efforts, and doing better work as a team. So we've seen a couple examples of how we can learn from looking closely at our own teams, at our workflow, from putting our meetings and our remote collaboration under that microscope. And we saw why those micro moments matter, why it's worth being intentional about creating safety on remote teams, Because when I feel safe to talk about the challenges I'm facing, maybe you do too. Maybe we see each other's experience more clearly. And those conversations help us not just get through this period, but hopefully grow into better ways of working remotely and someday towards more inclusive ways of working in person too. So now let's get concrete about what deliberate choices we might make and what we want our new normals to look like. So I'm going to share some thought starters now. This is not the science part. These may not make sense for every meeting or every team. They're just meant to get our wheels turning about how we might apply some of the science to our conversations next week, tomorrow, later today. So for audio delays, think about how you might pump the brakes on conversation speed to avoid those unintended interruptions. You know, when you listen to a podcast or a playback of a webinar, you might go 1.5 speed. Think about going down to like 0.8 speed. Also, try staying unmuted. Provide little bits of feedback to show that you're listening. Okay. This isn't for you, Preet, but like right now, I'm in a room that is perfectly silent, so I can't tell if you know people are still with me or not, right? But in our meetings, we can do that. We can stay unmuted and kind of give that back channel of feedback to people, letting them know we're still with them. That's especially helpful too, by the way, when it's harder to see people. For visual cues, ask yourself, am I listening like I want to be listened to? And if we're honest with ourselves, the answer might not always be yes, right? You know, so how can we resist those browser tabs that are competing for our attention? What can we close before the meeting starts so that we can kind of stay focused on faces and really be active in conversation? And for the last one, better turn-taking dynamics, I think one thing that's really resonated with people and that I've started to do a lot myself is like asking ourselves before the meeting, how many people do we really need to align on this topic? Conversation size really does matter if real dialogue is important to achieve the goal of your meeting. So think about if everyone's turns were hypothetically equal, 20 people in a half an hour meeting gives everyone 90 seconds to hold the mic. If that is not enough, you got to add time or subtract people. You can also try to identify the calls where you want to encourage more balanced conversation. The people that might need help getting their voice heard, or people that might need reminders to pass the talking stick. Just thinking about how can we create more symmetrical communication across teams in the meeting, but also over the course of a week, over the course of a year. So with those things as a starting point, I'd love to get into the conversation. We can kind of leave these things up as a thought starter. Preet, do you have any questions, or do we have any questions in the queue? I think you're muted, Preet.
That is true. I was muted. I've done these events so many times, and still the most basic of the tech things. I thank you so much. I was sharing that there's a lot of appreciation for a lot of the things you were sharing. Of course, many of the folks are still trying to, all of us are trying to wrap our heads around how much are we leaning towards, working in this fashion before things will go back to normal or not. So one question / conversation that I've had with many other folks in the community is experiencing fatigue around everything remote, especially for those of us who had never worked remotely, or the hybrid was, even though many folks in tech work in a hybrid manner. It was a very small minority, whether it's 1 day a week that you're working, or just one or two team members out of your 40-person team that's working remote. And so for many of us who are working full-time remote for the first time, there's general fatigue just around Zoom calls, whether it be work related or even like team building activities and things like those, where you just want to get away from your computer. Has that happened to you? Have you experienced it, and what do you do about it?
Yeah, I mean, fatigue is real. I think there's a couple things that have worked for me, and that I've heard people talking about that work. Taking breaks is important. When you do come to work, doing whatever you can to block out the rest of your environment, so you're not context switching between home life and work constantly. And sometimes that's not possible, but whatever extent you can do that, to whatever extent you can, that's good. I think a lot of us are doing some of this to ourselves too with multitasking. I know that, I know all the academic stuff about multitasking, but it's still so tempting on so many calls to just dash off a couple emails. And our brains don't like that. Or that makes our brains tired, at least. You're just chewing up more. Your brain just chews up sugar, basically, and really works in overdrive when you're, doing three things at once, when you're jumping between tabs so quickly. And so I think that if you can discipline yourself to kind of pull back from multitasking, that's another thing that can kind of give you some energy back.
Right.
And I think all of that, hopefully, and just not just breaks, but breaks between the calls in particular. So my days where I'm most exhausted is where I've got half-hour meetings, just one on top of another, with basically no breaks, that plow through my lunch. And they're just big enough that I'm tempted to multitask in them. And so, 3-4 hours of solid meetings where you're multitasking in half of them, that our nervous systems just aren't built for that. So trying to just stay away from doing that to whatever extent you can.
Right. That's so true. That's so true. And quite often, I've been on meetings where you will see everyone on the call, and then you'll see either two people smiling at the same time. So, there's a Slack conversation going on in the background, because you're like, why are they both smiling at the same time?
And that's interesting, because sometimes that's actually having an asynchronous conversation during the meeting is a productive thing. That's not always multitasking. That's not always distraction. You can actually, it is possible to use the chat channel to get on the same page about things, because in a big meeting where someone's presenting, or they're for me, it's two executives are talking, and I want to sync with a colleague about, have you seen the document they referenced? It's actually valuable to kind of exchange documents, give context, things like that during a call.
That's so true. That's so true. In those terms, it almost feels like, as you said, a little even more productive. We just had quite a few questions pop in as you were answering my question. So I'm going to pull up Bonnie's question first. So I can even read it out. What could be a way to encourage our leaders to try these changes in our remote meetings for the longer term? Staying unmuted, more time to give feedback, encourage psychological safety.
I think that we are all moved to action by stories. Some of us are moved to action by evidence and by the science. And hopefully some mix of both can help encourage leaders to establish new norms. I think, whether a leader is focused on the well-being of their population, or it's about, making sure that teams can still work efficiently, productively together. A lot of the things I'm talking about are in that spirit, right? If it's helpful actually that the stuff that helps your well-being agrees with the stuff that helps your productivity. And so this, I mean, I think that the science is on our side, and hopefully our executives can hear some of those things.
That's incredible. Thank you. I hope that answers your question, Bonnie. We have trying to pick a question. This is a kind of a funny one. I think many of us deal with this awkwardness quite a few times. How do you avoid overlap or two people talking at the same time quite often in online calls? Especially when that space, you don't get that space to enter the conversation.
Yeah, avoiding that overlap is tough. I think that making sure that you can still see the people you're talking to is one way to do it. Think about in person. When someone wants to speak, like you're sitting in a circle of 10 people and you're speaking, and someone wants to grab the talking stick from you, they'll often start to do more back channel. They'll lean in, and then just before they speak, their chest cavity will move up, and all these things are kind of unconscious in person. But seeing those things, like you coordinate with them. Like my turn ends, your turn starts, and we almost literally can kind of pass that stick if we're kind of visually coordinating. But another way is to consider slowing things down, staying unmuted. But there is no magic wand, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I think quite often when we think of remote, we completely forget how we used to do those things in person, and we think it's a totally different mindset. And you're right; those subtle cues. I hope our tools get so advanced that it's like it senses someone's volume is going up a little and kind of fades you in nicely for those conversation transitions. Aaron here has quite an interesting question, and I think more focused on what you might be working on day to day. So, how you've done user research, has that changed quite a bit? Once you've gone remote, and how do you measure success with your research or share your research that's been conducted remotely?
Measure success. So I think that a lot of so I guess in this talk, I've been trying to translate some of what we know into actionable stuff. And teams that have adopted some of these things, I think there's a lot of anecdotal feedback that, wow, like things do feel more dynamic now. There are also tools out there. There are like little plugins that help you actually show how often you're speaking. Offline, I can kind of share what it is. I'm forgetting the name of it now, but there are little indicators that actually show you how much of the conversation, Zach, you've been talking for 18% of the conversation. And those things can be actually very helpful little interventions. But even having things like the talking stick top of mind when you go into a decision-making meeting can make a difference. Measuring the success. So I think that some of the ways that success is measured in the science lab is actually measuring the turns of people. So how much are people talking? And if we intervene in such and such a way, or if we make it easier for people to see each other, does the turn-taking pattern change? You can also do surveys to ask people, how easy was it to read the social cues of the people you were talking to, or how comfortable did you feel with them? The survey data is another way that we learn about this. But for most of day to day, it's kind of how a team feels. It's the before and after story that is most resonant for people.
So true. That's so true. Forbes has, I think, kind of a follow-up question, and maybe not just specific to Google, but in general, we've we hear, or at least the people that I talk to, you hear kind of two camps where it's like, yeah, productivity has kind of gone down since they've started working remote, or quite a few friends I have, especially in agencies, services, you see that, they feel either productivity or workload has kind of increased with having gone remote. Is that something you've noticed, heard of, when you're even talking to others in your workplace or outside? And are we able to quantify, or do you quantify that performance?
Yeah. I think we know just broadly across knowledge workers that people are working a longer day. People are working hard. And that's part of that fatigue. But from the data I've seen out in the industry, there has not been a decline in productivity. There's actually been, if anything, an increase in productivity. And we think this might have to do with fewer interruptions. For people whose core job is to do heads down work, it's a little bit easier to protect that time and do that heads down work. For people whose job is more about email and being in meetings all the time, those people I think are feeling even more pain. But I haven't actually conducted any research during the pandemic to see what's happening with these things at Google or anywhere else. So I'm not the best person to answer that question, but there's a lot being written about it, and it's a really incredible time to be running experiments, because I think we are learning that productivity does not have to suffer when we are remote.
So true. I think even the productivity part is kind of evolving, or because early on when COVID had just happened, I think most organizations and teams just transitioned existing workflows from offline to online. Exact same thing, and of course, workload went really high up. And now it's kind of the more adaptive mindset that, okay, you can't just, pick up the same framework and apply it to online. And so you see teams, thinking of many of the things that you shared today, which makes a lot of sense. Jill is asking about, all these challenges that we're talking about from someone that's just entering the design workforce as a junior. But do you have any kind of like tips for folks that are, entering the workforce, and then all these major changes that are happening culturally and professionally?
It's a very hard time to be starting. I think that if I was starting a new role now or starting out in a new industry, I would just really lean into the virtual coffee. Anyone that'll meet with you to give you context about the organization, about the discipline. Think about all the conversations you would have at the water cooler at work or in the hallway. Those like, oh, this is an important person to know because they've been around at the organization for a long time. Or when you go into these types of meetings, be sure to, the stuff that's not actually in your welcome packet or in the official materials, but that you need to just learn from people and that you tend to learn informally. I think that if you're new to an organization, you might need to lean into the one-on-one meetings and virtual coffees so that you can get more of that informal FaceTime with folks to learn about the people you're working with and the organization.
So true. It almost feels like, and I think again, it's very subjective to the teams that you're working with or the organization you're working in, but the human element can get drastically impacted. And again, you shared during your talk those small nuances. You could, someone you're sitting with, and you can just look at their face and tell if they're, excited, or if they have kids and did not sleep last night, and you can pick up on those smaller kind of examples. And we have another question here, which kind of points out at the, if you are trying to bring that human element online, do you set, kind of like cadences, like no, everyone should have their camera on at all the times, or and if you don't, how do you manage the situation where half of the folks might have their cameras off completely?
Yeah, I think that it's hard to talk about blanket policies for camera on or off. I heard something on the Marketplace podcast the other day that really stopped me. It's actually different from a lot of the research I presented today, and that's okay. That's part of the leaning into the learning of the pandemic. There's a national conversation going on about race in the U.S. And as conversations about race are happening in the workplace, this person was saying, and this person was an academic psychologist, I think. They were saying that people felt more comfortable with the camera off, talking about certain subjects that were really sensitive. And that makes total sense to me, right? You don't always want to be, and some people might feel too uncomfortable to even talk, and they want to use the chat channel to ask questions and talk instead. And I think those things are totally okay. I've also been relying just personally on the phone more often. Sometimes you need your hands free to feed the toddler or do the housework, and some people so well that you can just kind of call them on the phone, have the earbuds in, and you can get in sync about whatever you need to get in sync with without having the face-to-face. I think that a lot of what I said in the talk does apply to that 2, 3, 4, 5 person working session where people are trying to make decisions, and they really need to kind of make that eye contact, that visual connection, and trust each other. But the 20 or 30 person meeting where everyone is kind of giving their status updates of the week, it's not critical that everyone be visible for that. I've seen a lot of people also coming onto the call with camera on, and then over the course of the conversation, people mute so that they can eat. For all of us that are trying to, work through our lunch break, mute your camera, eat, so you can kind of still stay in the conversation in a lighter weight way.
Right.
So no super scientific answers on this. I think we're learning a lot every day.
Yeah. I think that's kind of also an incredible kind of a closing note to the conversation today. As you said, there are no kind of blanket rules, policies, workflows that we can just apply and it works for every single person. Everyone's trying to adapt to this, whatever we are going through. I don't quite like the phrase new normal because I think we're still going through it and evolving and learning about how to react and deal with it. I
think it's all about new normals, and it's new normal plural that we choose. We're choosing our own future today with the stuff that we do. So really encourage people to kind of put your work under that microscope and run those little experiments, because they will pay off.
So true. So well said. Thank you so much, Zach. This was incredible.
Thank you for having me.
I again, a lot of appreciation for you and all the learnings you shared today. We will the talk recording will stay on the website. So if folks who joined in a little later or want to share it with their team members and all, feel free to do that. A few folks asked about the tool you mentioned, Zach. I'm also really intrigued and interested to try that out. So we'll try and get that recommendation from Zach and share it in the thank you email along with the recording. Thank you so much, Zach. Really appreciate it. This was an incredible conversation.
Thank you, Preet, and thank you everyone for all the awesome questions.
Thank you. Bye. Okay, that was really, really incredible. So let's make sure we do carry forward the conversations. If you are not part of the Slack group, you can head to designx.community/Slack. and we can carry forward these conversations. Zach shared a lot of incredible information today, a lot of learnings from his research and work he's been doing at Google on remote collaboration and facilitation. There are also quite a few other leaders in the DesignX Slack who might be able to help you with your specific kind of environment or team-specific challenges too. So it is a tough time. Everyone's trying to adapt to it, and that's what the community is here for, to help you and help each other. So thank you so much. We will be back with our next virtual talk soon. You will get to know about it in the emails as well as the Slack group. So have a good one. Bye.